and gentlemen, dear friends, we welcome all of you and congratulate you on International Women's Day. Celebrating this occasion and honoring an annual meeting is a tradition of the Iranian resistance. This year, we honor this occasion while the people of Iran have been involved in an uprising for more than 5 months. The uprising began due to the crime committed by repressive forces of the regime against a young Kurdish woman named Mahsa Amini, who was murdered on the bogus charge of malveiling. The heinous crime was a sort of protest that quickly spread to the entire country and caught the attention of the world, and the presence and active role of women and girls in all scenes and their courage, guidance, and leadership in many of these scenes have been particularly noteworthy. The world has praised their bravery. Because 43 years of operation, Iranian women have a leading role in the movement against the misogynist regime in its entirety. As a result, the slogans on the pavement have turned into "Death to dictator, death to Khamenei." However, this was not simply a reaction to current events. Iranian women have a long history of a struggle during the era of the mullah's rule. After the overthrow of Shah's dictatorial regime, hundreds of thousands of women, led by PMOI, began to expose the repressive policies of a mullah's regime. Despite facing harassment, women actively participated in all meetings, gatherings, and political and electoral campaigns of the resistance for 2.5 years. On June 1981, when Khomeini ordered the killing and suppression of all PMOI and other political groups, many women were arrested alongside men and imprisoned. They were subjected to the most severe forms of tortures by executioners who targeted them twice as hard for being women. Despite all of this, many of these women who survived the regime's prisons and torture centers went to Ashraf along the Iran-Iraq border and joined the National Liberation Army of Iran. It could be said that this was the only army in the world where women fought side by side with men on the front line against the repressive forces of the regime, especially the Revolutionary Guard. After Mrs. Rajavi was elected as the General Secretary of the PMOI, there were profound changes in the structure of the organization. PMOI women made up 30% of the Mujahideen membership, but were not in decision-making or senior positions. However, following internal developments, women made up 51% of the executive committee, which was the highest decision-making body of the organization at that time. The significant development, which was not formalistic in any way, occurred amidst a serious struggle with religious fascism. It helped to remove historical, cultural, and ideological obstacles that existed within the organization and among the PMOI women themselves, as well as among the men. For the PMOI, which was engaged in war with the mullah's misogynist regime, it was clear that without a woman playing a role and being empowered and promoted, for which they were fully qualified, it would have been impossible to overthrow the Iranian regime and establish democracy. It was in this light that the issue of women and the resistance movement approach to the position of women within the organization became a fundamental issue. We believe that fighting against the religious dictatorship is the key to achieving real equality for women. We have turned the issue of equality from mere words and slogans into a reality. And this has been possible because we have linked the fight for women's rights with the fight against the ruling theocracy. We firmly believe that the political demands of our people cannot be realized without overthrowing this regime, and that defending women's rights requires determination and a commitment to this goal. Furthermore, we believe that the rights of different classes and nationalities, as well as of national interest, can only be realized by overthrowing the regime. By underscoring these foundations and beliefs, our resistance movement presented the path to an all-out resistance against the misogynist policies of a clerical regime. The leading and impressive role of women in the uprising is a result of this 44-year struggle. Naturally, the indispensable role of Mrs. Rajavi, the NCRI president-elect, in achieving women's equality and the empowerment of all women is outstanding. She paved the way for all women to participate because she believed that all women can and must break free from the shackles of patriarchal culture that has prevailed for centuries. Her motto of "we can and we must" started from this point, igniting a battle to revive the true identity of women, which required an intellectual renaissance that started within women but extended to men as well. Of course, all these developments and changes were not achieved overnight, but rather they were results of months and years of a serious and exhausting efforts. I would like to conclude my speech concerning yesterday's decision by Belgian Constitutional Court on transferring the Iranian regime terrorist diplomat, which will be examined by another court. As Mrs. Rajavi has announced, we sympathize with the family of Olivier Van Castile and demand the immediate release of him and other hostages. We fully understand the pain and suffering of the families of the hostages with all our hearts, and we do everything we can to free them. But unfortunately, in the last 43 years, for every hostage who is exchanged or freed with incentives, this regime has taken or killed at least 2 new hostages. If the regime claims in case of Assadi's release, it would not take any more hostages, as Mrs. Rajavi has already announced, the process would be simple. They can commit and oblige in an official document before United Nations to release Mr. Van Castile and the rest of the hostages this very day, and not to take any hostages from any country under any circumstances, and that they will not carry out terror and explosions in foreign countries. Once again, on the occasion of International Women's Day, I thank you all for your participation. Thank you.